At 4:12 p.m. on November 9, 1944, Corporal Elias Ward of the 28th Infantry Division lay flat in the soaked mud near the outskirts of Hürtgen Forest, Germany, waiting for a German assault force he knew was coming. To his left, a shattered oak tree oozed sap like blood. To his right, 3 wounded men strained to breathe through punctured lungs and broken ribs. And beside him, half buried in mud, sat the weapon that had nearly got him killed 3 separate times that week. The M157 anti-tank gun, a weapon that on paper could stop a Panzer. But in the real world, in the tangled nightmare of Hürtgen, misfired, jammed, and froze solid in the cold. In the next 7 minutes, Elias Ward would break 2 Army equipment regulations, violate 1 direct order, destroy government property valued at $418, and stop a German armored probe that had already overrun 2 American platoons. The weapon he used wasn't supposed to work in those conditions. According to the manual, it couldn't. But Ward didn't care about manuals, he cared about keeping the men around him alive. Elias Ward grew up in Iron Ridge, Pennsylvania, a steel town 40 miles outside Pittsburgh. His father was a machinist. His older brother worked the furnaces. By age 12, Elias could rebuild a carburetor, sharpen a lathe bit, and weld a cracked tractor hitch using only scrap metal and stubbornness. When the Depression deepened, he fixed broken stoves, water pumps, and coal chutes for neighbors who paid him in bread or potatoes. When he enlisted in 1942, the Army labeled him mechanically inclined. His father called him a good hand. Ward didn't say much, he wasn't the loudest, strongest, or fastest. But when machinery failed, and in the Army machinery always failed, he was the man people looked at. The M157 anti-tank gun was supposed to be dependable. Supposed to stop armored vehicles. Supposed to give infantry a fighting chance. But the Hürtgen wasn't a battlefield. It was a punishment. Rain froze on breech blocks. Mud clogged elevating gears. Moisture turned cartridges into unreliable duds. On October 31st, Private Karl Yoder opened fire on a German transport truck. The gun misfired, primer strike too light. While Yoder tried to clear the shell, a machine gun burst shredded him from hip to shoulder. He never made it back to the casualty station. 4 days later, Sergeant Adrian Sloan tried to use his gun to stop a half-track. The recoil system seized. Sloan reached for the firing lanyard again, and a German mortar dropped into his position. Only pieces of him were ever recovered. On November 7th, an entire American platoon was forced to retreat when their anti-tank gun froze completely solid. 2 Shermans arrived too late. By the time armor pushed through the trees, 17 men were dead. The guns weren't failing because of poor handling. The guns were failing because the forest hated machines. Ward approached Lieutenant Brenner the night of November 7th. "Sir, the recoil cylinders are freezing, hydraulics are seizing in the cold." Brenner didn't look up from his map. "The equipment is Army approved, Corporal, maintain it according to procedure." Ward tried again. "With respect, sir, procedure doesn't work out here, the seals aren't holding, the cylinders need." "That will be all, corporals." Ward walked out of the tent knowing that the lieutenant would rather trust a 3-ring binder than the men dying outside. So, on the evening of November 8th, long after curfew, Elias Ward sat behind the gun pit with a flashlight hidden under his coat. He disassembled the recoil system and drained the freezing hydraulic oil into an old coffee tin. He replaced it with a mixture of kerosene thin to prevent freezing, rifle oil scavenged from 3 cleaning kits, and a tablespoon of grease scraped from a half-crushed ammunition crate. It was chemically unsound, mechanically insane, and expressly forbidden by every maintenance regulation the Army had. Then he stripped the firing pin assembly, polished the face with a whetstone, and shaved the mainspring by 2 coils to increase strike force, at the cost of drastically shortened service life. By the time he finished, the gun was dirtier, louder, and more dangerous than before. But it wouldn't freeze. And it wouldn't misfire. November 9, 1944, 4:12 p.m. Snow drifted sideways through the trees. The forest was quiet, too quiet. Then Ward heard engines. Not trucks. Not half-tracks. Treads. A German armored probe, Panzer Grenadiers supported by at least 1 light tank, pushing directly toward the U.S. line. If they broke through here, they'd cut the battalion in half. Ward loaded a shell. He felt the gun vibrate, alive again. His assistant gunner whispered, "It's gonna jam, Elias, it always jams." Not this time. The enemy tank emerged first, its turret turning like a beast sniffing for prey. Ward exhaled, aimed at the lower glacis, and pulled the firing lanyard. The gun slammed back like a living creature, recoil pistons hissing. The round smashed into the tank's armor, smoke spilled from the driver's hatch. It wasn't a kill, but it was a wound. German infantry fanned out, rifles and machine guns spitting fire, bullets cracked overhead, tree bark exploded, men screamed from nearby foxholes. Ward ignored it, he worked the breach like a factory laborer on a night shift. Load fire recoil smoke. Load fire recoil sparks. Load fire. Never once did the gun jam. Never once did the firing pin hesitate. Over 7 minutes, Ward fired 9 rounds, a pace no manual recommended. On the 6th shot, the tank stopped moving entirely. On the 8th, flames erupted from its engine deck. German infantry tried to pull back, dragging wounded through the snow. Ward fired the 9th round at a cluster of machine gun tracers. Silence rolled across the forest. When Lieutenant Brenner arrived, panting, boots slipping in the mud, he stared at the smoking wreckage, then at Ward's gun. "That recoil cylinder, that's not regulation." "No, sir." "And that firing assembly, what in God's name did you do to this weapon?" Ward didn't answer, he expected handcuffs. Instead, Brenner crouched, ran a glove over the scorched breech, and whispered, "Does it still work?" "Yes, sir." "Then you're going to show every gun crew in this battalion exactly what you did, tonight." Within 48 hours, 12 anti-tank guns had been modified. By the end of November, an entire regiment. By Christmas, the improvised Ward mix hydraulic solution was being used from Hürtgen to Bastogne. The army would officially deny knowledge of these field modifications. But the men who survived because of them didn't. Elias Ward was never awarded a medal. Never officially recognized. Never promoted. His record lists only demonstrated initiative in maintenance duties. He returned to Iron Ridge in 1946, worked as a machinist like his father, married a girl from Uniontown, raised 2 daughters, and never once told anyone that he had held off a German armored assault with a weapon held together by kerosene, grease, and stubbornness. He died in 1982. His obituary didn't mention the war. But there is one line, handwritten, in the margin of an old maintenance log from the 28th Infantry Division. "Ward's gun never jammed, wish every gun had a Ward." Because that's how progress happens in war, not through manuals, not through perfect machines, but through ordinary men who refuse to let their friends die because someone in an office said the equipment is adequate.